Hi, I'm Matt Wilcox, and thank you for tuning in to watch my film, Four Guys, the Navy, and World War II. This documentary film explores the stories of four Navy veterans who served in the Pacific Theater during World War II. Although each was in the Navy, they experienced vastly different situations. One was stationed on a B-24 reconnaissance airplane. Another was in the Seabees, which was part of the Navy's construction battalions. Another veteran was stationed aboard a ship and conducted amphibious invasions, while the final veteran was a Navy Frogman, which was a predecessor for the Navy SEALs. Their stories are very unique, yet combined, they form a solid understanding of the worst conflict in human history. I want to thank Lakefront TV for airing my film as part of our Salute to Veterans series, but more importantly, for honoring these veterans' service by letting them tell you what they experienced. This December 7th, let's remember the Japanese attack on the U.S. Naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, and the long-lasting effects that has had on the United States and the world. These are the real stories. These are the real men who fought and sacrificed so much for our nation. So please sit back and enjoy this historic and brutally honest testament of America's involvement in World War II.
Who at age 17 knew what the war was going to be?
Simply use that as a time to say, and I've changed my mind since, but during the war and for some time afterward, I certainly hated the Japanese.
And at night, Wash Machine Charlie used to come over pretty regular. Every time the moon come out, you could bet he'd be over there. And I swore he used to drop the bombs out of the window to throw them at us or something.
Went to Chatham High, but didn't graduate because the war came on. And at 17, I decided I would join the Navy.
My name is Robert Fastici. I was born in New Jersey in May 11, 1926. I was down in Cedar Grove, New Jersey. I went to Bloomfield High School and I didn't finish the 8 to 12 years. In the third year, I enlisted in the Navy at age 17.
My name is Tom McCarthy. I enlisted in the Navy from Indiana in August of 1942. And I was fortunate to survive service in the Pacific.
My name is George Derby, and I came from Olean, New York. And I joined the Navy in 1943.
I am Harry W. Lockhead. I joined the Navy in 1943. And later became one of the first and original Frogmen for underwater demolition work.
And I went to boot camp up in Great Lakes. We left, we did our 6 weeks or whatever it was, and that was in January of 1944. I was assigned to a LCI 559 in Norfolk, Virginia.
My dad had been in the Navy in the First World War, and I wanted to follow him. One of his words of wisdom was that the Navy takes them over there and the Navy brings them back. So it's a good idea to be in the Navy.
As I was in the Seabees, we went to Williamsburg, Virginia to Camp Perry for our basic training.
My mother had to sign a waiver because I was not 18, which she did, and I left for the service.
I was assigned to a photographic squadron flying B-24s. The Navy called them PB-4Y1s.
We went through the canal and up to San Diego. And we were in San Diego, and the skipper gave us a liberty. And but there was a group of us together in the hotel in San Diego. They called us, "You got to come back. We're leaving."
We boarded that ship, and our shakedown cruise was down to California, to Oxnard, where we picked up a company of Marines and took off for Tarawa. We saw everything from quite a distance, so I did not get the experience as the Marines got landing. But you could see so many people in the water and on the beach that never made it to fight the Japs. And one of the big memories I have is the flies, which were feeding on the dead bodies in the water and what have you, got so bloated they came on the ship. You couldn't chase them off because they couldn't fly anymore. To get rid of them, you had to wash them off the ship. That kind of stuff is worse than fighting. But there was no, as I say, I was aboard the ship. I didn't see the main fight. I was just somebody that brought people there to do it. Saw the Battle of Tarawa, didn't like it too much, and shortly after the battle, a Lieutenant Kaufman asked for some volunteers. He said aerial surveillance is not good enough to find out what's underwater or how deep it is underwater, that they needed swimmers to go in and map it out and let us know exactly what is there. And he says, if it's in our way, blow it up and get rid of it. They wanted volunteers. I volunteered.
We left the United States in about November, I guess, of 1943, and went to Barber's Point in Hawaii. And we spent 6 months there, which was really wonderful. That was great. And in fact, it worked out very much again to my advantage, because by the time we got down to the theater of war, a lot of the best Japanese fighter pilots had been eliminated.
You got to remember that the Second World War, we were kind of by ourselves. You got letters from home. A lot of times we didn't get a letter for months. You know, it just it wasn't that fast. We had V-mail, and you had a mail. You didn't have radios or things that went on. We heard what was going on, but we only knew what we were doing.
We were a photographic squadron, so we occasionally had fresh water from when the photo lab had to develop film. They had to have fresh water, and so after they used the water, they would turn on the showers so we could take a shower with fresh water. Other than that, we had to depend on the rain, which fortunately was pretty good, pretty frequent. We could usually get a shower when it rained. The only problem with taking a shower in the rain was that if you got all soaked up and then it quit raining, you were kind of stuck.
And the skipper told us we had to make a few different zigzags. We had to go across the 180th meridian. That was the, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but that's the date line. We did that, he told us, we did that for only one reason. We had to confuse the Japanese as to where we were going, because we had to go and do some invading, as they said. We had to do some firing and some shooting.
We were going to talk a month or so before we made our first mission. And admittedly, I think we all got bored, or at least I know I did, and I'm pretty sure that most of us were, because we were thinking about getting to the war, and we finally get down there and we just sit there. So we were at 20,000 feet on oxygen. Well, it was necessary for me to get in the belly turret before we started climbing up to altitude, because I had to be on oxygen. So I got in the belly turret, which is retractable on the V-24. I climbed in the belly turret and hooked up my oxygen mask and everything, and I sat in the belly turret for a couple of hours until we finally got to Saipan at 20,000 feet. And then we had a photographer who stood in the bomb bay and took care of the cameras during the mission. And there was a hydraulic valve right outside the bomb bay. So when we got to Saipan, he opened that hydraulic valve and it allowed the belly turret to drop back down to its normal position, or to its extended position. The only thing we hadn't realized was that when he opened that valve, that turret just went, and so there I am, sitting there at 20,000 feet looking down at the ocean. And all of a sudden, well, I knew he was going to open the valve, but boom, and boy, I left my stomach.
They asked the whole fleet, and out of the fleet, 120 of us that volunteered. We went to the Naval Combat Demolition Base in Maui. There we were told, we don't know how to do the job because it's never been done before. So you guys figure out how to do it and write the manual.
We went to an airfield there. They took us to an airfield and they let us off, and we set up our shelter halves, and we lived that way for quite a while until we got into hospital tents. And all this time we were working on these huge big runways. And when we got through, there was 4 runways and hard stands and taxiways in between them. And they used to hold 45 airplanes on each taxiway.
It was exciting, absolutely. I hated anti-aircraft fire. We were over Nauru one day, and Nauru had been a source of phosphate for the British, with a British protectorate before the war, and the Japanese took it almost without opposition, and they captured the British guns and ammunition. So they had the advantage of the British guns that they didn't have on the other islands. So we were over Nauru at 10,000 feet, and obviously I'll never forget sitting there in the belly turret. There weren't any planes in the air except us, but sitting there in the belly turret watching a poof, 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 as the anti-aircraft fire is exploding all around us. Realized then, you know, I was 19 years old, I was at least 20 during that time. Had my 20th birthday while we were out there. But I had had people throw rocks at me and chase me, and guys pick a fight or whatever, you know, and try to hurt me. But I thought, that's the first time in my life I ever had anybody try to kill me. And I realized, you know, he's not just trying to hurt me. He's not even just trying to scare me. He wants to kill me. And boy, that's pretty damn final. If I go down here today, I'll never see my girl again. I'll never see my parents again. I won't live to have a family. That brings you down to earth. And I couldn't do anything else, so I just closed my eyes and said a prayer. There wasn't anything to defend against. I mean, there wasn't any point in sitting there watching it, so I just closed my eyes and said a prayer. And thank God again, we got home safely.
We went to Tinian in the Marianas, and we got off there. There was nothing there but just destruction, just devastation. And the runway and the Japanese plane that was there, I was sitting in it. I got a picture of me sitting in it. And the hangar was all blown to the devil, and This one plane was sitting there, but it was all blown up. Now we got to the Philippines in the middle of the night, and the skipper gave us all a beer. We were entitled to one beer and one piece of steak. I'll never forget that. And we even had the music. We were dancing each other, a bunch of guys, because tomorrow could have been the last day. We didn't know that. That's why he did that. Just one morning, they sounded general quarters, and I was running up the ladder to get to my gun. And as I got to the top on the gun deck, where I made to go to my gun, ship started rolling over to the right. And I reached for the railing, and I reached for the railing, and my head was only about a foot away from the 40 millimeter when it went off. And I went down, put me down for about 15 minutes. And they woke me up. And I lost my hearing in my right ear. Every morning, from morning until night, the Japanese planes came. They never stopped. And it was hot as hell down there in the Philippines. And I remember we were on that deck, they wouldn't let us secure 100%. We couldn't go below deck. They used to bring us food and water up. We had to stay by our guns until night.
Yes, but during the war and for some time afterward, I certainly hated the Japanese. We all know what they did on Bataan. We all know as a general rule how they treated prisoners and so forth. Now I'm more inclined to be a little bit forgiving and think, well, at least the men that we fought were fighting for their country the same way we were. I expect that, I know that some of them were fathers, husbands, every one of them had a mother and father, so they didn't want to die any more than we did.
But we got used to it. It was just one of those things, that's all. I saw a lot of American dead bodies, especially when those planes had come in. One hit the end of the runway one day, and the tail gunner got out, and we were down there in a truck. And he come wandering across the field, and we put him in the truck and took him up to our thing, and he talked to us. And later on, when I asked, he'd breathed in fire or something, and he died. He'd been burned pretty bad. But he was just wandering, you know, like, and talking and everything, and he just died, that's all. But wasn't nice. Never as nice, no.
Those guys that said, hey, I don't think I'm going to make it, all too frequently they didn't. I don't know why, but it seemed like that those, maybe it's a true perception that they had, but so many people said, I'm pretty sure I know of people that, that said, I don't think I'm going to make it. Well, they didn't. I always felt like I would make it. I never had any doubt that I would make it, although I was scared a time or two, but I was pretty confident.
The underwater demolition crew, these was us divers, Navy divers. We had to protect them. They went in close to the beach, and we were right there next to them. Now we stayed with them until they cleared the beaches of the debris that was in there so our troops could get in. And we made our U-turn and we went back out. And that night, the Japanese had suicide swimmers, so we always had to stay by our guns all night long. And we did shoot one down, and one of the Japanese swimmers came towards us, and we tried to take him aboard, but he took off he had a vest on, he took it off and he went underneath our propellers and he killed himself.
There was a girl, of course, that I'd been writing to for a couple of years, and I actually thought I don't know when you're 21 or 20 years old, and under those circumstances, time flies. I expected to get married when I came home in 1944. And she met me downtown that night and told me that she was about 2 months pregnant. And I would have married her anyway, but she said no, she was going to marry the man that was the father of the child, and they had agreed that they would get married, but they wouldn't remain married. He had no interest in staying married, but he had agreed that he would marry her and give the baby a father. And so that was the end of that. So my 30 days at home, Christmas 1944, was not the happiest time of my life.
I mean, a bomber is a great big tin can. God, they were big. They were awful big. We were standing on the runway when the first ones came in, and holy Toledo, were they big. We never knew where they were going or what it was. We knew they were bombing Japan, but you didn't know ahead of time. You didn't know where those guys were going. They were just taking off. And we worked all day, and then at night, at 3 o'clock in the morning, the damn airplanes started taking off. You wake up. I knew we were bombing them, and especially after they started burning them. It must have been terrible. They dropped millions of pounds of bombs on them, and it was all for fire. They fire raids that they had that burned the whole cities, and you know people had to get killed, a lot of them. The atomic bomb was another thing, but I mean, they had burned a lot of people before that. There were more kamikazes at Okinawa than anywhere else. Hundreds of kamikazes, hundreds of Japanese planes. They were like flies. You could look up at the sky and all you saw was airplanes that looked like flies, and they came down one after the other, coming down at our ships. I know that one of that destroyer that took the bow off, and that took the bow off from the bridge right on forward. We built 3 Quonset huts, and of course, not ever hearing of air conditioning, we were quite inquisitive because they were air conditioned, and little did we know what they were going to do in them. And so Tibbets came over, and he looked at our new barracks, which we just got out of tents, and we were in Quonset huts. And he says he wanted them Quonset huts, and whatever he said he got. So we were 10 days later, we were on LSTs. 5 LSTs took our whole battalion to Okinawa. Yeah, Okinawa was just a terrible place. It was all muddy and dirty. Yeah, it wasn't. But they raided us regularly, always. And I went to work in Shuri, and I worked in the pits all the time. We just dug coral. That's what we were doing. And if there was an air raid, then I guess you just crawled in a hole. And the Japanese were still there, and a couple of times we dug into a cave, and the civilians came out, and we had to put them on a truck and take them to the compound. We were on Okinawa. We were getting hit pretty hard up there, and so it was. I mean, you're just a little guy and you don't hear a lot, you know? I mean, you know what you're doing, but we had no idea what the hell, what was going on, where they were. We knew the Sixth Fleet went past us, and it just, it's different when you don't know everything. But when it all came out, then we realized what we had done. I think it was July 25th when we left Okinawa, heading back to Pearl to get ready to go to Japan, to invade Japan. So we got back to Pearl and we went into dry dock. When we were in dry dock, August the 15th, 1945, is when the war ended.
Arrangements are now being made for the formal signing of the surrender terms at the earliest possible moment. General Douglas MacArthur has been appointed the Supreme Allied Commander to receive the Japanese surrender.
I was glad to see the end of the war, that's for damn sure. And when I came back and they didn't ask me to stay, I didn't offer to stay.
And I went into Japan just after the bombs were dropped. Went into Yokosuka Naval Base, from there to Tokyo, and we just checking to make sure they weren't mined and drawing the ships in and trying another Pearl Harbor.
I knew damn well we wouldn't have to go in. We were getting ready to go to Japan. And they had brought trucks in, they had brought all kinds of materials there to Okinawa. And we would have been there. The atomic bomb, the greatest thing Harry did. He told them drop the damn thing, and they did. And I realized that it was a horrendous thing to do to people. But they weren't going to stop, they never did.
I saw nobody in Tokyo. It was completely leveled. Square miles of flat ground with maybe a gas pump or a safe sticking up. Of course, that was basically because they built the city out of wood and they burned down.
I was discharged on New Year's Day, 1946. And the girl that typed up the discharge had to correct a mistake, and she was complaining about having to work on New Year's Day. And I told her, I'm sorry, kid, but you know, I've been working every holiday for the past 3 years. And I said, for you to have to work a few hours a day, that's tough.
We got back to California, and we went through the Golden Gate Bridge, and nobody said hello, other than put us into a place overnight that we had no heat, no food. We got off in Newark, New Jersey, I think, off the train, and we had to take a bus. There was nobody to pick me up. We had to take a bus back to Cedar Grove, New Jersey. And I walked down Stevens Avenue to little 1139 Pompton Avenue, Cedar Grove, where I grew up. And then my oldest brother met me. I met him. My older brother Mike, he was 6 years older than me. And I went to where he was working, and he come running down the hill. I'll never forget that day. And he slid down and he hugged me, he gave me a kiss. Like anybody else, we just were thinking we had a job to do, and we did it. And I guess there was a lot of hardships in it, but everybody else was in the same boat, so it was all the same, and we kind of stuck together.
I had terrible nightmares. I would wake up feeling that there was somebody in the room, and I couldn't draw a breath to scream. I couldn't do anything. There's somebody here. You know, there's a danger. I can't move. And it would take me, I know it seemed like a minute. It was probably a few seconds before I would be able to draw a breath. And when I was able to draw a breath, then I was able to kind of wake up and say, okay, you know, it's just your imagination. But yes, I did have those for a while after I came home.
And then I was discharged from New York and went back into a normal life, if life is normal.
I hope you enjoyed my documentary film. It was a great honor to work with these veterans, and hopefully by sharing their stories, we've helped you have a better understanding of their sacrifices. If you're a veteran and you live in Lake County, Florida, we have a very robust Veteran Services office. You can learn more by logging on to their website, lakecountyfl.gov/veterans-services. To all of our veterans who have served or now active duty, thank you very much for your service. We salute you and thank you.
That was good too for me.